Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Disability Rights New Jersey's presentation on Medicaid Eligibility Basics for Adults. My name is Marius Thanasiou. I'm a legal advocate here at Disability Rights New Jersey, and I will be your host for today's presentation. Over 30 years ago, Disability Rights New Jersey was designated the protection and advocacy organization for the state of New Jersey by Governor Christine Todd Whitman. That means that under our federal authority, we investigate reports of abuse and neglect, monitor institutions and providers to ensure the protection of rights, represent clients with disabilities in legal matters, provide information, referral, and technical assistance, and lastly, engage in outreach, training, and education of self-advocates, families, and more. Our mission is to preserve and advance the human, civil, and legal rights of persons with disabilities. Today, I will be talking about important Medicaid rules and rights. Medicaid is important in its own right. It provides health insurance for nearly 2 million New Jerseyans. It is also critically important for individuals who need long-term services and supports, especially those receiving services through the Division of Developmental Disabilities, or DDD. My goal for this session is for all of you to have the following takeaways. First, an understanding that there are many different ways to be eligible for Medicaid. I'm going to be going through several key Medicaid programs and the process of applying for those programs. Second, that you only need to be eligible under one program to be eligible for Medicaid. Third, that you cannot be terminated from Medicaid until the state Medicaid agency reviews your eligibility for all Medicaid eligibility groups. And fourth, that you have a constitutionally protected right to a fair hearing and a right to the continuation of services pending the outcome of your fair hearing. Like Band-Aid is a brand name for an adhesive bandage, New Jersey brands its Medicaid and Children's Health Insurance program as NJ Family Care. I want to note that while the Children's Health Insurance Program, also known as CHIP, is under the NJ Family Care brand name, it is beyond the scope of this presentation today. As the illustrated representation demonstrates, under the umbrella of the brand name NJ Family Care sit New Jersey's Medicaid programs, technically called Medicaid eligibility groups. And there are many, including those you see here. I like to call them Medicaid eligibility doors. And just because you don't have the key, as in you don't meet the eligibility criteria for one door, doesn't mean you don't have the key to another eligibility door. We'll be going over each of the doors in the picture, which is why you don't see a door for CHIP despite it being part of Medicaid in New Jersey under the NJ Family Care brand name. You may note that one of these doors is not like the others. The Medicare Savings Program works a bit differently, as we will discuss in greater detail later in the presentation. Many individuals have Medicaid because they are eligible for and receive cash assistance through Supplemental Security Income, or SSI, which is administered by the Social Security Administration. This is SSI-related Medicaid. To be eligible, you must meet these broad criteria. To begin, an applicant must be either over 64 years old or be blind or disabled of any age. An applicant's income must be no more than $998.25 per month for an individual, or no more than $1,475.35 per month for a couple. The asterisk next to income is just to note that the income thresholds noted on the slides are operating off of the assumption that the applicant is a person living alone or with others in their own household. Income limits for SSI-related Medicaid follow the income levels from SSI. Income from SSI is based on the federal benefit amount plus the state supplement. The income limit for SSI-related Medicaid and Medicaid only are based on the SSI total monthly payments in 2025, which are location-specific and differ depending on an individual's living arrangements. As such, if the applicant is living in a licensed residential healthcare facility or is living in someone else's household and receiving support and maintenance, this income limit will be different. As is the case with all of the income limits we will be going over today, these numbers change every year. The numbers you see here are for 2025. An applicant's resources must be below $2,000 each month for an individual or $3,000 for a couple. An important note here is that your resources must be below this limit at the stroke of midnight on the first of the month, each and every month. While your resources may go over the limit during the course of the month, you must make sure you are below the resource limit by the first of the following month. Some resources are exempt and are not counted for the purpose of determining an individual's Medicaid eligibility. These include, but are not limited to, one's home and one car. So, where do you go to get started? For SSI-related Medicaid, New Jersey's opted to have the Social Security Administration determine Medicaid eligibility through the SSI process. This means that your SSI application is your Medicaid application, and when you are found eligible for SSI by the Social Security Administration, they notify the state of New Jersey that you are also eligible for Medicaid. Once eligible, a recipient receives what is called Plan A, the broadest service package. Plan A includes doctor's visits, hospitalization, prescriptions, and more, as well as personal care assistance. Generally speaking, for all of the programs I will be discussing today, Medicaid is delivered through managed care organizations, or MCOs. Some people don't want the SSI cash assistance for whatever reason, but they do want the Medicaid piece only, thus the Medicaid only program. The criteria for Medicaid only aligns with SSI-related Medicaid in that they are the same criteria. As was the case with SSI-related Medicaid, the asterisk next to income is just to note that the income thresholds on the slide operate off the assumption that the applicant is a person living alone or with others in their own household. As was the case with SSI-related Medicaid, you must make sure your resources are below the threshold by the stroke of midnight on the first of the month, each and every month, and exempt resources include, but are not limited to, one's home and one car. A special consideration that arises with regard to Medicaid-only applicants is that of the Childhood Disability Benefit, or CDB, formerly known as DAC or Disabled Adult Children. Section 1634 CDBs are part of the Social Security Act. This pathway into eligibility is relevant when an adult child is eligible for and begins receiving SSDI. That would mean that while the child is financially eligible for SSDI, they are no longer eligible financially for the Medicaid-only door. As such, this is a pathway towards Medicaid eligibility for adult children who are transitioning from SSI to Medicaid-only with CDB status. The adult child is still eligible for Medicaid if these criteria are met. At least 18 years old, disabled or blind prior to 22, has been receiving SSI on the basis of disability, has lost SSI as a result of receipt of Social Security benefits on a parent's record due to retirement, death, or disability of the parent, resources below or at $2,000, not including a special needs trust or ABLE account, financially eligible for the Medicaid-only door if not for parental Social Security benefits. Medicaid rules state that when determining Medicaid eligibility for CDBs, the County Social Service Association, or CSSA, that is determining an individual's Medicaid eligibility is to disregard an applicant's unearned income from derivative SSDI. That means that when you apply for Medicaid through a CDB, the income that comes from SSDI you receive as a derivative benefit from a retired, deceased, or disabled parent is not counted when establishing your eligibility. We recommend that you contact the Social Security Administration to obtain a letter affirming your CDB status should you meet the criteria we mentioned. CDB will not come up on an initial Medicaid application. Rather, they will be relevant when an individual is up for redetermination, as the adult child has to have been receiving SSI before they became eligible for SSDI as a derivative benefit. While the unearned income an individual receives through a CDB is not counted for Medicaid eligibility purposes, proof that someone is eligible for a CDB is not always readily available to the Medicaid staff that are evaluating your eligibility. As such, we recommend that you obtain proof of your CDB status and provide it to your CSSA. You can do so through your local Social Security Administration office. You can find your local SSA office via the link on this slide. If you only want the Medicaid, not the SSI cash assistance, while the same income and resource criteria apply, you need to file a Medicaid application in New Jersey. You can either do so online, which is the most straightforward option, or you can file in person at your local County Social Service Association, or CSSA, with a paper application. You can follow the link on screen to the online application. Like SSI-related Medicaid, once found eligible, a recipient receives what is called Plan A, the broadest service package. For those individuals with income or resources slightly higher than the SSI standards, the NJ Care ABD program may provide eligibility. The income and resource limits are a bit higher here, as you can see on the slides. An applicant's income must be no more than $1,305 per month for an individual, or $1,763 for a couple, which is 100% of the federal poverty level in 2025. Resources must be below $4,000 for an individual or $6,000 for a couple. As was the case with SSI-related Medicaid and Medicaid only, you must make sure your resources are below the threshold by the stroke of midnight on the first of the month, each and every month, and exempt resources include, but are not limited to, one's home and one car. Much like the Medicaid-only program, you can apply for the NJ Care program either online via the ABD application or in person with your County Social Service Association. The link is provided on the slide. NJ Workability is another Medicaid eligibility program that provides critical access to Medicaid eligibility for individuals with disabilities. The criteria are as follows. The applicant must be 16 years of age or older. The applicant must be working full-time, part-time, or be self-employed with proof of employment. The applicant must have net earnings of $400 or more and must file federal taxes. And lastly, the applicant must have a disability determination from either the Social Security Administration or the state's medical review team. Most importantly, you must actually be doing the work, you must actually be being paid for the work, and you must file taxes on the income you gain from the work. While there is no income or resource limit, it is important to note that tiered premiums may be imposed based on an applicant's income level. I'll be showing you all the premium chart on the next slide. Presently, portions of both earned and unearned income are not counted for the NJ Workability program. Guidance from the state is ambiguous as to the specific earned and unearned income that is disregarded, instead encouraging applicants to apply to determine where they would fall in the premium chart. Much like the other programs we have covered so far, you can apply for NJ Workability at the link on the slide, or you can apply in person with your local County Social Service Association. Once eligible, recipients receive Plan A, as we discussed in the SSI-related Medicaid, Medicaid only, and NJ Care slides. The next eligibility group I will discuss is the Affordable Care Act Expansion Group from 2014. This group goes by many different names, including ACA Medicaid, Expansion Medicaid, MAGI, NJ Family Care, which is a bit confusing, and Obamacare Medicaid. Here at Disability Rights New Jersey, we refer to this group as MAGI, which stands for Modified Adjusted Gross Income. There are several significant eligibility criteria to take note of for this group. The first is age. MAGI ends when an individual turns 65. That means that if you are eligible through this door, you need to do planning and seek legal advice before you turn 65. While children can qualify for MAGI and are eligible under a different income threshold, we will not be going over the children's criteria in this presentation as it is centered around adults. Number 2, there's no disability determination. Unlike SSI Medicaid and ABD Medicaid, you do not need a disability determination to be eligible for MAGI. It's okay to have a disability determination, but important to note that for individuals on SSDI, once you are eligible to receive Medicare, you are no longer eligible for ACA Medicaid. Number 3, income counting rules are different for this program and are tied to IRS rules and dependent on one's modified adjusted gross income. While MAGI countable income is generally the same as taxable income, there are a few exceptions. The most common is Social Security retirement or disability benefits, which are counted even though they may not be taxed. Number 4, the income limit for adults is 138% of the federal poverty level, or $1,800 per month for an individual. It is important to note here that unlike the programs we described previously, where income limits applied to an individual or a couple, for MAGI, income limits are tied to household size. While the $2,433 per month limit is for a household of 2, this limit increases as the number of people living in the household increases. Number 5, there's no resource limit for this program, which is very helpful, but also requires thought when one must transition to another program where there is a resource limit. So where do you apply? You can apply online at the website on the slide. That's the best way. Most applications are processed by the state vendor, which, as we've discussed, brands itself NJ Family Care. Once eligible, you receive the Alternative Benefits Plan, which is nearly identical to Plan A with some notable limited exceptions for nursing home services. In addition to the Medicaid eligibility groups discussed thus far, there are a number of special waiver programs designed to meet the needs of individuals who meet clinical eligibility criteria and who need long-term services and supports, particularly in home and community-based settings. MLTSS, or Managed Long-Term Services and Supports, provides PCA, home-delivered meals, non-medical transport, care management, and more. In order to be eligible for MLTSS, applicants must meet both financial and clinical eligibility requirements. We will go over the financial eligibility requirements on this slide and the clinical eligibility requirements on the next slide. The financial requirements include gross income of $2,901 per month or less, or the use of a qualified income trust above that threshold. Resources and assets from all sources must be at or below $2,000 at the beginning of each month. Spousal impoverishment protection under MLTSS ensures that a spouse who needs long-term care doesn't deplete their assets and income, leaving their community spouse with little to live on. A community spouse is the spouse of the individual who receives MLTSS that resides at home in the community. This protection allows a certain portion of the couple's combined resources and income to be retained by the community spouse, ensuring that they can continue to live independently. Importantly, there is a 5-year look-back for any asset transfers made for less than fair market value. An asset transfer for less than fair market value is a fancy way of saying that you gave someone something for less money than it was worth. An example would be gifting your child your used car for free. For applicants who have transferred assets for less than fair market value in the 5-year period prior to application for MLTSS, the Medicaid agency assesses a penalty based on the total amount transferred divided by the average daily cost of nursing home services set each year. That calculation results in a number of days an applicant is found eligible for Medicaid but cannot receive any MLTSS services. For example, A 30-day penalty would mean that an applicant would not have access to MLTSS services for about a month. The clinical requirements for MLTSS include the need for hands-on assistance with 3 out of the 7 activities of daily living, or ADLs. These include eating, bathing, dressing, toileting, bed mobility, transfers, and locomotion. Or in instances where the individual has cognitive impairments, that they require a combination of supervision and cueing and hands-on assistance with 3 or more ADLs. This is a more comprehensive list of some of the services provided by the MLTSS program. As you can see here, MLTSS includes services like care management, home-delivered meals, nursing homes, and more. Applying for MLTSS is a bit different than the Medicaid programs I've covered thus far. MLTSS has clinical and financial eligibility requirements, which means you need to apply for both. We'll first discuss clinical eligibility determinations. If you are currently enrolled in Medicaid, contact your MCO to begin the process of a clinical eligibility screening. For a reminder, MCO stands for Managed Care Organization. If you are not currently enrolled in Medicaid, to begin the evaluation process for the clinical eligibility component of MLTSS, you can contact the Aging Disability Resource Center, or ADRC. ADRC will conduct a preliminary screening over the phone and then send that information to the Office of Community Choice Options, or OCCO. While you can contact the OCCO directly, the OCCO usually does not accept a direct application. As such, we recommend you contact the ADRC to begin the clinical eligibility evaluation. The number for the ADRC is on the slide. Once you have contacted the ADRC or the OCCO, you should complete a Medicaid ABD application, which you can find online at njfamilycare.org, as we've gone over in the previous slides. Alternatively, you can always fill out an application at your local county social service association. Most importantly, be sure to check yes on the question asking if you need nursing home-like services. As part of the application process, you will need to provide financial records from the past 5 years. While some county social service associations will ask for every month, others ask for quarterly records. We recommend that you ask your local CSSA before you make copies. Generally speaking, the county office will provide you with a letter after receiving your application indicating what documents they need to process your application. The DD Supports Program is the next waiver program we will be discussing. The financial eligibility criteria include income at or below $2,901 per month and resources at or below $2,000. For the clinical eligibility requirement of meeting functional criteria for DDD services, an individual must document that they have a severe chronic disability which 1. is attributable to a mental or physical impairment or combination of mental or physical impairments. 2. manifests before age 22. 3. is expected to be lifelong. And 4. results in substantial functional limitations in 3 or more of the following areas of major activities of daily living. 1. self-care. 2. receptive and expressive language. 3. learning. 4. mobility. 5. self-direction. 6. capacity for independent living. And 7. economic self-sufficiency. An important note here is that for private duty nursing to be covered, it must be considered medically necessary in order to be covered by the Medicaid Managed Care Organization. This is just a list of examples of some of the services included under the DD Supports program. These include behavioral supports, day habitation, and occupational therapy. The Community Care Program is the next waiver program we will be discussing. Generally speaking, the financial eligibility and functional criteria for DDD services are the same as that of the DD Supports program. What makes CCP different is that in addition to those requirements, the individual must be determined by DDD to meet the intermediate care facilities for individuals with intellectual disabilities clinical level of care. This means that without the home and community-based services provided through the community care program, the individual would need to live in an institution. In New Jersey, we refer to these institutions as developmental centers. There are 5 in New Jersey: New Lisbon, Hunterdon, Woodbine, Vineland, and Greenbrook. Lastly, there is the CCP waiting list. Individuals are eligible to apply for enrollment in CCP when they are reached on the waiting list or when their circumstances are deemed an emergency by DDD. When the individual is reached on the waiting list, DDD will mail a letter to the individual and then contact them to discuss services and program eligibility. The CCP waiting list can get a bit complicated and is worthy of a presentation in and of itself, so we recommend that you contact Disability Rights New Jersey for more information if you have questions on that. To be eligible for DDD services, you must be Medicaid eligible. This eligibility may be obtained through any of the doors we have discussed today. To be determined DDD eligible, an individual must complete the DDD application for eligibility and go through the DDD intake process. The application for eligibility is available on the DDD website at the link provided on the slide. Once the application and all supporting documents have been received, DDD will conduct a preliminary eligibility review and a DDD intake worker will create a case file for the individual. After a preliminary review, DDD will schedule a mutually agreeable time and location for the completion of the New Jersey Comprehensive Assessment Tool, or NJCAT. A final review regarding the individual's eligibility for DDD services will be made when DDD receives the NJCAT results. Once a determination regarding the individual's eligibility for DDD services has been made, a letter will be mailed to the individual. It can take up to 60 days after the application and all supporting documents have been received for a determination to be made. The next program we're going to be discussing is that special door which I had promised we would come back to, the Medicare Savings Program. An important thing to note here is that the Medicare Savings Program is a Medicaid program, which may seem a bit confusing. It's actually a lot more straightforward than it may seem. MSPs are a Medicaid program that helps qualified individuals pay for their Medicare. The Medicare Savings Program helps people with limited assets pay for some or all of their Medicare Part A, hospital insurance, and Medicare Part B, medical insurance, premiums, deductibles, copays, and coinsurance. QMB eligibility requires an income that is less than or equal to $1,305 per month or 100% of the federal poverty level. The difference between QMB Plus and QMB Only is that of resources. QMB Only applies to individuals who have resources between $4,000 and $9,660. SLIMB requires an income at or below $1,565 per month, or 120% of the federal poverty level. QI requires an income at or below $1,761 per month, or 135% of the federal poverty level. An important distinction here is that the QMB program pays for more than SLIMB and QI. QMB helps with copays and deductibles, while SLIMB and QI only cover Part B premiums. To apply for the Medicare Savings Program, you can call the Division of Aging Services at the number on the slides, or you can go online via the link on the slides. There are protections in the law for pre-termination review. What do we mean when we say Medicaid in this context? The specific rules and regulations call for the Eligibility Determination Agency to conduct these reviews. In New Jersey, this could mean either the County Social Services Agency for formerly known as the County Welfare Agency, acting under the authority delegated from the Department of Human Services Division of Medical Assistance and Health Services, or DMAS, the state vendor acting under contract with DMAS, or DMAS itself for certain eligibility groups. The buck ultimately stops with the Department of Human Services Division of Medical Assistance and Health Services. By statute, they are designated as responsible to oversee and enforce compliance with all state and federal Medicaid law. On the slide are some references to the regulatory authority for the federal right to be screened for all programs prior to termination, the Medicaid communication from DMAS regarding screening for individuals who have lost their SSI-related Medicaid, and a court case relating to screening for individuals who were previously on an MSP. An important note here is that Medicaid must transition the individual to an eligible program with no gaps in their coverage. So what do you do if your Medicaid is terminated? Well, your right to a fair hearing is constitutionally protected. If your request for a fair hearing is timely, coverage will continue during your appeal via a continuation of benefits. You also have the right to represent yourself, have someone else represent you, or to have legal representation. When you receive a termination notice, pay attention to the date on the letter. While you may have received the notice far later than the date on the letter, this date establishes when the 60-day countdown begins. To be clear, you have 60 days to request a fair hearing for a Medicaid termination. You only have 10 days to request a fair hearing for service authorizations such as a reduction in private duty nursing hours. Furthermore, it is important to note that the 60-day deadline to request a fair hearing is a COVID-19 extension which could go away at any time. The previous deadline for Medicaid terminations was 20 days. That being said, we highly recommend you submit your fair hearing request as soon as possible. Your termination notice should include a form to request your fair hearing. Should your notice lack this form, please mention this omission when you contact Disability Rights NJ so that we can make note of this persistent problem and so that we may provide you with our form letter to request a fair hearing. Where do you send your fair hearing request? Well, you can either mail or fax your fair hearing request. We strongly urge you to keep a copy of your request and prove you submitted it through a fax confirmation receipt or a mail tracking receipt. Thank you for joining me in exploring the basics of Medicaid eligibility. For more information, please do not hesitate to contact Disability Rights New Jersey at the number listed on the slides or at the email address on the slides. Lastly, to stay connected with the exciting and important work of our organization, you can visit us at disabilityrightsnj.org or on any of our social media pages that are listed on the slide. Thank you for joining me and learning about the basics of Medicaid eligibility for adults today. I hope you learned something new and that you have a great rest of your day. Take care.